I'm Myk Aussie here in Edmonton, Canada, the Great White North, and it's a pleasure to be on the podcast with the Yank on the Footy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 98 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I am glad that you're listening. I think you're going to absolutely enjoy this episode. My guest today is an Australian expat who has been living in Canada for over the last 2 decades, currently living in Edmonton, Alberta. He is a sports podcast connoisseur and has built a sports media empire here in North America, covering just about every sport played here, but not forgetting about his beloved Australian rules football. Before we dive into the discussion, ladies and gents, don't forget that you can find everything related to the podcast at my website at yankonthefooty.com. I hope you'll consider checking it out. You can leave a voicemail, share your views on an issue from a previous episode, or if you've got a question or something of that nature, you can also sign up on the mailing list. You can also leave me a review there. Remember, you can also reach me at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. Now, last week, I shared a listener survey with my subscribers as well as sharing it on social media. If you're somebody who listens to the show on a regular basis, I would love to hear from you. I've heard from about 15 different people, and I'd love to get your thoughts as we get ready to embark on the second 100 episodes. I'll put a link in the show notes. And if you enjoy the show and you want to consider helping out the show, you can go to my Buy Me a Coffee page, which is also on my website. And if you're interested in any kind of the podcast gear, be sure to check out the Redbubble page, also found on my website as well. And today's club of the episode is the South Gawler Lions. And the Lions were founded in 1889 and have won the 4th most first-grade premierships in all of South Australia. In fact, this is one of the clubs that today's guest played with during his footy career prior to his time in the Sandful. The Lions have 5 boys clubs from under 13s through seniors and 3 girls squads, beginning with the under 13 group. They play their games at the Eldred Briggs Reserve in Evanston, which is located north of Adelaide. And this weekend, the Lions A-grade club defeated Freeling. This was a bit of a barn burner here, beat them 102-24. Now let's jump into the discussion with Kim Harrison, or as those of you who know this great gentleman here, you might know him as Myk Aussie. Enjoy, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, everyone. My guest today is a sports commentator operating his own sports and comedy TV channel known as MykAussie.tv, and he is a former player with the Woodville Warriors in the SNAFL before the Adelaide Crows came into the comp. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Kim Harrison, or as many of you know him, Myk Aussie, to the podcast. Kim, thanks for coming on, man. I'm so glad we were able to get this finally set up.
Well, thanks, Mr. Yank on the Footy. You have an absolutely amazing nickname, and I think I first heard about you through Cody Royal, the coach, well, now former coach of Team Canada. So you got a great name, and congratulations on what you're doing and some of the people you've interviewed. Fantastic.
It's been an absolute fun journey, learning about the game over the last 5 years. And I just, the whole idea of a podcast was just, to me, it was just kind of a natural progression. I like to talk. I work as a public address announcer as well. So this was just something I felt I needed to do to kind of fulfill my role with the game. So it's the first thing I have to ask you is you are a native South Australian, and you now live in Edmonton, Canada. How'd you get to Edmonton? What drew you to? I'm sure it wasn't the warm summers and the nice falls.
Well, what drew me to Edmonton was the great people I met at the CFL Grey Cups at the Spirit of Edmonton parties. And I nearly went home for good 6 years ago, but decided to move here. And it's a friendly city, and we've got Aussie football here, and been with the same lady for 6.5 years. But how I ended up in Canada, well, I love snow skiing and snowboarding. So used to be in Winter Park outside of Denver. So that's how I came to Canada, my love of the snow.
So you lived in the U.S. for a while as well then?
Yep, in off season
Okay.
1991 to 92, went on a 6 month holiday, ended up in the ski resort for about 5 months and learned to ski, and then went back to play for South Gawler Lions for another 3 or 4 years. Then came to Canada in March 1998. I was managing a computer AutoCAD IT company.
Okay, well that explains that takes me in the direction of one of the questions I was going to ask you as far as your education when you headed off to college and you left the club for a couple of years there. We're not going to talk about skiing. I tried it once and I almost hung myself with a tow rope on the bunny hill. So it's not something that was in high school, and I've never been back to a ski resort again. I feel there's no need for me because one, I don't have a clue what the heck I'm doing. I tried doing the lesson thing and it just was not something that was going to work out. So you're working in IT and you're having a great career with that. How did you find yourself getting involved with the whole idea of being on radio and on television? Was that something that you just kind of fell into, or was that something that you knew you wanted to do?
Yeah, I kind of did fall into it. I studied mechanical engineering in Australia. Then I was managing this IT company. But in Australia, my good friend Garth Wright, I went with him and we were in a room of only like 10 people after Greg Norman, the great golfer, won the South Australian Open. And then that enabled me and him to get a Grey Cup media pass, which is the championship of the CFL. And then from there, I went and interviewed Darren Bennett in the San Diego
Hmm.
Chargers locker rooms in Seattle, then went to Denver and Minnesota. So I basically then sold myself to the NFL because no one in Australia at the time was reporting on the NFL. Don Lane used to do a late night show, but there was a gap, and I got to know some of the top people at the NFL. Then a few years later, I'm at the Pro Bowl, and I went to 3 Super Bowl weeks as well. So
Wow,
fell into it, and then took advantage of it.
that is so. You got the media pass for the Grey Cup while you were in Australia.
No,
No.
I'd just gone back to Australia for holidays. Talked to my friend Garth, who was in the
Okay.
media, and we had some ideas about doing some sports magazines. And the Grey Cup was in Vancouver, and I applied and got the pass, and
Okay. Okay.
went from there, and just got incredible, funny video with all the amazing, great fans, and that's how it started.
Okay. So part of it's not right to call it a shtick, but part of your persona is your hat that you're wearing. I don't know the proper term for the hat, but I know it has an Australian logo on it, and it has footballs hanging off of it. How did the hat come to be part of Myk Aussie, and how did Myk Aussie
Well,
come about?
Well, if you see all my videos, I actually used to have corks on it, and that's the thing in Australia because back in the early 1900s, the farmers and my grandfather in the outback of Australia, it's so hot, they would put corks on their hat, and as you moved your hat, it would be like a windshield wiper to keep the bugs, the blowflies, which are very big in Australia, to
Okay.
keep the blowflies out of your eyes. So I just started wearing that, and people loved it. And then I've developed it into putting little footballs on it.
Okay. Okay. I think I have seen some of the older ones that have the corks on there, but it is definitely an interesting look, and it's something that you can't go anywhere with, as working in media without that. That is part of your uniform, I would say now, correct?
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
Okay. Okay.
absolutely,
It's kind of like Superman without his cape.
yeah.
Okay, you have to have that with you. So so how did the persona of Myk Aussie come about?
Oh, I had a little bit of trouble working in that computer company, and I actually ended up quitting it. Just I don't want to go into it, but I just thought,
Okay.
you know what, I'm going to go for broke here, and if things do go bad, well, bad luck. They kick me out, and I end up back in Australia. Bad luck. So I got in a little bit of trouble in the Green Bay Packer rooms, which is in my movie, but I didn't do anything wrong. You just got to be a little bit careful. So I just went for it. I went into locker rooms, change rooms when maybe my media pass said I shouldn't. But hey, you sell yourself, you keep out of trouble. And I just tried to interview as many famous people as I could and just got a lot of very funny footage. And the hat, and being Australian, you can take advantage of that, but be sensible, of course.
Okay, that is, so you don't want to get it. I'm not going to ask you anything more about what happened, because that's not something that's not germane to the conversation. Now, it's interesting. First of all, did they find it interesting that you were there as an Australian that was taking an interest in the game?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the CFL players and the fans were just loving it. I mean, they didn't know I was living in Vancouver, but you know what? They just thought I was there on holidays. But hey, I was still Australian. I'd only been in Vancouver about a year at that time, and I just got back from holidays, and it was fantastic. And yeah, and the people were fantastic, and I just interviewed as many people as I could. Got a great 3 days of Vancouver Grey Cup, and then incredible footage from the NFL. Put it all together in a movie. And the streaming side, my friend was on the Microsoft website, and he says, "Mick, we're going to have video soon." So we were one of the first to convert like a 50 meg AVI file down to 5 meg ASF, and Western Canada had high speed internet, one of the first places in the world. So we had true streaming video. Drove to Kelowna. I'm drinking out of the Stanley Cup in Kelowna, and did a first ever true internet video show in about July year 2000.
Wow. So you're kind of on the cutting edge of everything here. Then you're somebody you are a pioneer when it comes to online video. Then it's that I did not know, because I've not seen the movie yet, so that's not something I've had a chance to watch yet. I do need to take a peek at that, though, because I'm always good for a chuckle. But now you're not getting out into the locker rooms as much as you used to, are you? Because I know or are you still doing that, as well as the radio and TV spots that you're doing?
Well, we haven't had any sport because of COVID. I mean,
Well, right.
I went and watched the Aussie football last year. I didn't ref it because of COVID, and in my driving job, I didn't want to risk that. So, and the CFL didn't play at all last year. But yeah, my main gig is every Friday night on Sports Grid Radio, which used to be Fantasy Sports Network, that you could get on many TV stations all over the USA and Canada. So Gabe Morency, the host, I've been on with him for like 19 years. And about 6 years ago, he says, "Mick, let's concentrate and we can do AFL picks, best bets every week." So him and I are the only two regularly doing AFL talk on radio and TV in USA. So I enjoy that a lot.
Well, that is, yeah, and there are a handful of us that are doing podcasts in the US about the game. There's 4 or 5 that I can think of off the top of my head right now, besides myself. So there's we're trying. We're trying to sell this game. Okay, we're trying. Because you've covered lots of different sports. You covered the NFL. You covered the CFL. You've seen it behind the scenes. First of all, out of the two competitions, which one do you think is not necessarily better clubs or that sort of thing, but which do you think is a better game, the CFL or the NFL? And if that puts you in a hot spot and you don't want to answer it, that's perfectly okay with me. But because the big difference, if I'm not mistaken, the field is wider, it's 10 yards longer, the end zones are bigger, and you've only got 3 downs and an extra player.
I absolutely love them both. So
Okay.
NFL, CFL, and Aussie football are my favorite 3 sports.
Okay.
NFL, the TV coverage is amazing. I think it's probably the only sport in the world you're actually better off to watch on TV because of the replays, the amazing big catches, and the screens is just incredible. The CFL, I believe some of the rules are actually a lot better. It's a quicker flowing game, the 3 downs, wider field, as you said. They can run in motion, a lot more punting. So that's better for us Aussie footballers of punting. But yeah, the standard of the NFL, just because of pure numbers of 330 million in the US compared to 35 million in Canada. But, there's a ratio, and we have some good USA players up here in the CFL as well, and Doug Flutie and quite a few. Jeff Garcia, there's quite a few have gone down and made it. Cameron Wake have made it in the NFL.
Yeah, Wake has had a pretty good career. Yeah. So you're doing this TV show each week with Gabe Morency, and you're also appearing on a show in New York City, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
That's the same show. They're based in New York City.
Oh, they're based in New York because I saw that he was from Montreal. Okay, so he's out of New York now. Okay. So I had that a little bit mixed up there, but you mentioned that there was a bit of an issue that you had with somebody who is another sports commentator, cheerleader of games, that type of thing, and that was with somebody who I don't listen to a great deal, and we've traded emails. I somehow managed to get blocked on Twitter by this gentleman's show, and to this day, I have no earthly idea how in the hell that happened. So you've had some interesting issues with number one of the Indianapolis Colts, Mr. Pat McAfee, which I think he seems to be a pretty nice guy. We talked a little bit off air today about what we think might have gone on with his infatuation with footy, but you've had a little bit of a dust up, if you will.
Yeah, well, first of all, I got to congratulate him on having an absolutely fabulous and famous show. Like the views he gets and the money he's making. So right now, his main sponsor is FanDuel, and they kind of own, or they're a very big part of Sports Grid, which is the show I go on. But I'll gladly tell the story. Yeah, sure. I saw him do a little video, and he's in front of his TV watching an AFL game, and he's going, "Oh, look at this game. I've never seen this game before. This is fantastic." I'm thinking, hang on, buddy. You're an NFL punter. There's guys like Darren Bennett, Sav Rocker, Ben Graham, Matt McBriar. Like, for you to say that you haven't seen the AFL, that's like saying, okay, you got a job in radio and you don't know the difference between AM and FM. So I kind of called him out. I said, mate, you're a great salesman, but you're either a fibber or you're a dumbass, right? And I did a little video. And at the time, he started covering the AFL, and he had Mason Cox on, the American. Right. So I emailed the producer. I said, hey, you should get me on your show because, me and Gabe, we're the only ones talking on TV in US Aussie football the last 5 years. I said, hey, I kind of dissed him a bit, but, it's good and fun, but whatever. Well, he didn't take it the right way because when he's interviewing Mason Cox, he goes, oh, yeah, Australian media is great. Oh, except for this one guy, he's the worst. And that was 100% me that he was talking about. So I just cracked up laughing. But come on, mate, that he made out that he didn't know the difference between rugby and Aussie football. Like with all those past NFL punters from AFL, I'm sure he did. So I just kind of called him a fibber and a salesman. But hey, he's part of the network I'm on now. So hopefully I'll meet him one day in New York at one of the Sports Grid functions.
Go out and have a beer with him and have a laugh about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and if you get the chance to do that, ask him how I ended up blocked on his account. Cause and again, I don't listen to his show regularly. I mean, when I listen to podcasts, I either listen to footy podcasts or I listen to true crime podcasts. Cause that's kind of the ones that really interest me. But I'm just really curious what the hell happened. Cause I have I generally don't give anybody a hard time on social media because I'm scratching and clawing trying to gain recognition at all because I'm a minnow in a big pond with a lot of really big fish. With the different podcasts and such that are out there, the different shows that are coming out of Australia. I realize that. So I don't want to alienate anybody. I mean, I want anybody to tune in and listen and go, oh, this is okay. I can come back and listen to this. But I did give Richmond supporters a hard time back in May. I was kind of unmerciful when they play. I think they played GWS at Marvel Stadium. And I believe it was 18,000 people showed up, or it might have been 8,000 showed up at Marvel Stadium. And I was, and I was being very sarcastic about, how it was, 5.7 kilometers of, uncharted wilderness that they had to get through between the MCG and Marvel Stadium to get, to go watch their club play. And I'm thinking, your club's won 3 out of the last 4 premierships, and you can't make a 6-kilometer trek to go watch them play. And everybody's saying, well, Marvel Stadium has no soul. And I was like, I called bullshit on it. I was like, you're the supporters. You bring your own damn soul to the game. It's not, the stadium doesn't have to entertain you. So I just, that's really the only time I've given anybody a hard time on social media about that, and I haven't done it since then with Richmond because they've had to play at Marvel a couple of times since then. And with COVID restrictions, they've not been allowed to have big crowds, but this was before that happened. And, club that's got 100,000 members, they could bring either 8 or 18,000 to watch their club play against a pretty good side. So it just really boggles my mind. If they were playing 100 miles from here, I'm not even a Richmond supporter. I would probably do somersaults half the way there to go watch an AFL game in person. it just didn't make much sense to me.
I have no problem with you dissing Richmond. I used to not be able to stand them. In the 80s, they had some great players like Royce Hart. And then in the 90s, they got all their long hair and think they were cool. But I've never liked black and yellow teams. The only one I do is the CFL Tiger Cats.
Yeah.
But yes, they beat the Crows in 2017. I respect them now. They won 3 of the last 4. But then they've got arrogant, like Damien Hardwick. Yeah, that was silly what he said. But then, they caused trouble up in the hub last year, and he's left his wife and gone off with a young physiotherapist. Whatever, good on him. But they just got too arrogant. So I'm actually loving it right now that they're getting beaten, playing bad. But then you got to respect Dusty Martin. What a player! I respect the way they play and the way they move the ball forward quickly. So I'm not going to diss them too much. But no, I'm not a big fan of Richmond.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where myself only having been following the game for 5 years, this is where I think I appreciate coming into the game so late that I don't have in my DNA. Yeah, you're a Crows supporter, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, they came into the competition in 91. Yeah.
So you probably have a pretty significant dislike of anything that's turquoise and black.
Well, yes, I used to play against the Port Adelaide Magpies with the Woodville Warriors, and you either love them or hate them, but they were a very successful club. Yeah. And yes, I did dislike the Port Adelaide Power Pap smears, I call them. But lately, because I've been away for 23 years, hey, Pap smears, that's not a swear word, that's all right. Because I've been away for 23 years, I actually like to stick up for South Australia now. So Melbourne, there's a bit of arrogance in Melbourne that sometimes I get annoyed with. So to be honest, I don't dislike the Power as much as I used to. I think they're an exciting team. They got some exciting players. So there's 3 or 4 Melbourne teams that I dislike more than the Power right now. Like I said, mainly because I'm being away from home for so long, and South Australia really is a fantastic place.
Well, that was what, when I was deciding on what club I wanted to support. I mean, I went back like 20 years and was creating spreadsheets in terms of wins and losses. And as I was learning about the game, because I'd watched the game for a couple of years before I decided on which club I wanted to support. I didn't come in and say, I'm supporting this club. And I actually had gotten it down to 3 different clubs. And I'm glad I made the decision I did. I think I told you off air that I'm a Cat supporter. I know your old jersey. I love those hoops. Yes.
You did.
Yeah. So yeah. I saw that today in a couple videos that I was watching. But my thought process when I was deciding was that I wanted to kind of support a club that was kind of away from the big amalgamation or grouping of the 9 clubs that are in Melbourne. So I was looking for something that was kind of a bit of a small town, not necessarily an underdog, because I guess Geelong's been pretty successful over the years. But it's just, the problem with it though is that I can never wear one of the Guernseys because I do not look good in stripes. if I put on something with stripes, somebody's going to come behind me and try to put a map of Australia on my butt because I'm going to look like a globe. But it's, I'm glad I chose the team, but I don't hate any of the other clubs because it's not in my DNA to do that. When I watch games, I want to see the Cats win, and then I want to watch 8 other competitive games. That's that's
you made a good choice. The Cats were my dad's favorite team before the Crows came in, and the legend Malcolm Blight played for North Melbourne Kangaroos. He grew up in Woodville Warriors. He coached Woodville. Well, the year I went to Woodville, Malcolm Blight left to coach Geelong Cats. So the year after that, 1989, we're watching the grand final between the Cats and the Hawks, and it's one of the greatest grand finals ever.
Yes.
Gary Ablett Sr. kicked 9 goals at full forward. So, yes, I've been a Cats fan. They're one of my equal second teams. I do like Jeremy Cameron, and as you know, they've won some premierships. I'm not as big a fan as Patrick Dangerfield right now because he left my Crows. He shouldn't have left the Crows, and if we had Dangerfield in 2017, we might have won that flag. And he said he wanted to be closer to home. Well, that doesn't wear with me because I've lived away from Australia for 23 years. But Patrick Dangerfield, fantastic player. I do like your Cats. I'm a little bit worried that sometimes they move the ball a little bit slow. They might need to play on a little bit more like, the Sydney Swans were fantastic. But no, Cats are a real chance. Jeremy Cameron, what a star.
Yeah, and hopefully he gets healthy and gets back here pretty soon as well. So you've been talking about, as you were saying, you've been talking about Australian rules football for the last 5 or 6 years here in the States. What do you think that supporters of the game that are outside of Australia, people in Canada, people in the United States, what do you think they should know about the game that they don't? Because, I'll leave it there and let you go ahead and respond.
They just need a little guidance with the rules because sometimes when they first see the game, they can't understand it. But we get 2 games here on TSN TV in Canada. I think the AFL needs to just give the games away. Don't worry about making money. Just give the games to some big networks in the USA. Just let them play it and show it because the guys that find it, and like yourself, I've met so many guys in Canada and America that see it, they start to play it, and they absolutely love it because it really is a fantastic game to play. So just a little guidance on the rules and word of mouth. Just keep talking. And like I said, the AFL should give it away to these big networks and get it out there even more.
And that actually kind of led me to one of the questions that I had for you. Let's say that Gil McLaughlin gets on the phone with you here in just a moment after we get done today. I've got your phone number now, so I can pass it along to him. And he hires you to run the incorporation of Aussie football on a grander scale in North America. Besides, giving the games away is I think a good start. But what else would you do?
Oh, well, Craig Hutchins, who's a big media guy in Australia, him and Damo Barrett, who's the top AFL media guy, they've talked about this on their podcast. And Hutchie had some ideas of showing it in the bars more. Just word of mouth and getting it on TV more. Giving it away just because, like I said, the people that find it absolutely love it. I like the way they've sped the game up this year. That helps the viewership and people enjoying it more because the game did slow down there for 5 to 10 years. Just promotion. The TSN coverage we get is fantastic here. A lot of people have that cable TV. I know in America it was on FS2. Get it on ESPN2. Like, give it away. Get it on ESPN or CBS Sports. Just get it out there as much as they can.
Let me ask you this question because I don't know how this works in Canada. Is there any advertising for it in Canada saying that, hey, at 11:30 p.m. tonight, the Sydney Swans are playing Port Adelaide. Is there any? Does that sort of thing even get mentioned?
No,
Okay,
not at all. You see it on the TV guide.
Mhm.
And then during the game, AFL Canada have their commercial, which is great. So then people can find the AFL teams all over Canada. So that's great. But, there's sometimes when TSN have 5 stations and they repeat and everything, I'm thinking we should have Aussie rules on one of these shows, one of these 5 stations right now. Sometimes we get it at like 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning. That's just fantastic.
Right. Well, that what you just mentioned there about having the mention of the AFL Canada in a commercial, that right there helps to grow the game in terms of people actually playing it, which I think is phenomenal. There, because we have no mention of it here in the States. I mean, it's on FS1, FS2, but they don't advertise it at all. It's on. The games are on it. Whatever games they happen to carry, 11:30 at night, 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever it happens to be. But there's no advertising, nothing at all. And if a game ends early, they end up, and what they have done in the 5 years that I've been watching the game. Now I have the Watch AFL app now, so I can watch all the games, live or on demand, that type of thing, and all the Fox Footy shows. But they cut away from the game more often than not showing the team song in the locker room. And then they play like a 20-minute montage of the same video of guys playing rugby. I have no idea who they are, with really bad techno music. So they're basically saying, here, you've watched game X. Now let's show you 20 minutes of game Y, 2 completely different games, not discerning between the two of them at all. And I've argued that, and maybe this is something that maybe you kind of do this with Gabe. Wouldn't it be in the interest of the AFL in terms of bringing in more viewers and more dollars to the game if they had a weekly, like on Wednesday night, a highlight show of the games for the previous week at like 8 o'clock on the East Coast here in North America, or in the US, and then maybe they ran it again at 8 o'clock at night on the West Coast of the United States and Canada, where they had a highlight show of the games that took place the previous week, and said, now here are the games that are going to be on TSN or on FS1, FS2, because between the United States and Canada, there's about 370 million people here. Even if they got 1% of the people here watching, that's 3.7 million people. That's roughly 10% of Australia's population right there. If they could get just even 1% of North America watching the game and being involved with it, I think it would be a huge economic windfall for the AFL.
Absolutely. The AFL, they say they care, but I really don't think they care as much as they say. I mean, they're trying to get all of Australia. They're trying to get more of Queensland and more New South Wales. But actually, in 2003, I met with Dr. Ross Smith in AFL House in Melbourne. It was fantastic. He gave me a lot of time. I told him what I was doing over here, promoting Aussie football. Then he set me up with the boss of Telstra, told him about the streaming, the radio. And then the US AFL, which is the United States Football League, they have the nationals every year. And they bring some players across, and you've probably seen some of the interviews I sent you with Robert DiPietro, Kevin Sheedy, the legend, Stephen Silvani. Like, it's fantastic what they did. So they should be doing more of that. That USAFL should be getting more coverage. But there's people like yourself, myself, Paul O'Keefe, the original founder of the USAFL. We all just think, oh, what a huge market we should be trying to tap into more. There's no golden answer. Like, most Americans care about NFL, baseball, and basketball. But yes, a huge opportunity to grow it. Players like Mason Cox making it down there is a good thing. Pat McAfee virus, him promoting it is a great thing. So yeah, just the show that I go on with Sports Grid, they're growing as well. So the more they grow, the more I can talk about it into more markets in the USA. So we just got to keep going and keep believing. We have a great game.
So it just, you said, now, Dr. Smith, was he was somebody that was involved in this is before I was following him, but somebody was involved with the game at that time. Was he in the hierarchy of the AFL at that time?
Yeah, he was like the development manager in charge of I think he was in charge of like $20 million to be spread out amongst the leagues in Australia, and they gave the US some money. I'm not sure the figures, but it's rumored that they kind of gave the US about $100,000 a year. I'm not sure of that, but quite sure anyway.
Right.
So yeah, they've done some stuff, but they should be doing a lot more.
Yeah, I think that we are such an untapped resource, and not even, as you talked about Mason Cox, in terms of, growing the game on the women's side, there are so many women who are playing the game here in North America right now. And you had people like, Danny Marshall, who's now playing with the Bulldogs in the AFLW, who's a college soccer player here, played with the club out of, I believe, Phoenix, in Arizona with the AFLW side there, and got discovered by a gentleman by the name of Cam Richardson, who used to be in the front office with the Bulldogs, and brought her and another player by the name of Sarah Roner over to try out. And Danny has stayed there. She and her husband are living there now. She's playing with, this is going to be her third year with the Bulldogs coming up. So it's, there are a lot of athletes that with the AFLW growing as it is, they're going to need players to fill out those lists, and they're getting already 2 or 3 dozen players coming out of Ireland that are playing the game here in Australia as well. So I think we're an untapped market.
The women's is an amazing story. When I was in Australia, no women were playing Aussie football. They were all playing netball. Now, a guy here in Calgary set up the football here for Canada, and then the teams go to the International Cup every 3 years. So America's down there, Canada, Ireland, the Irish girls are great. And Aussie football amongst the women is exploding in Australia. And it's great because all the country clubs like South Gawler Lions, they now have the women's team, which just brings more people involved, more money for the club. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm a big advocate of it. I think it's fantastic. And one of my greatest weekends ever was in Ottawa. They had the Canadian Nationals of the women's, and I was one of 4 refs, umpires. Well, I got paid to ref Aussie rules football women, and they were all 100% respectful, no back chatting. It was unbelievable. I'm in Canada umpiring women's football. It was just a fantastic weekend. It really was.
Okay, I have to ask you a very serious follow-up question here. Were your center bounces better than Razor Rays?
No, we didn't. That is something that's very hard to do. So no, we didn't bounce in the center. And that leads me on to something else. If I was coaching here, the one thing that does annoy me, new players try and bounce the ball. I just say, don't bounce, because it's so hard, as you know. And how often do you really get the chance to bounce the ball? But that split second when you're running flat out, even as any Aussie player, they're running flat out and they bounce it, it really can leave you to getting cleaned up. And if you bounce the ball and then muck up the kick, the coach might drag you. So I'd say to all the Canadian boys, don't even think of bouncing. So there's one little bit of advice to the USA guys playing.
Handball it to somebody, get a little short kick there, even if you got to just put it on the ground and let them take off and run a little bit there. So what was, when you moved to Canada, what was the biggest culture shock for you?
The cold weather would be the biggest. Other than that, very similar people. We're all very British background, British, Scottish, Irish, or European. So basically the cold weather. But I first moved to Vancouver and it wasn't that cold. But then when I moved to Calgary, I mean, I didn't even know what a block heater was in your car when you had to plug your car in.
Yes, yes.
So, the weather, absolutely, the weather was the biggest shock. But we've just come off a massive heat wave here, and I'd rather work in the real cold than the real heat.
I would agree with you there. I would, it was about 94 Fahrenheit here today, and it's just, I found a place. I sent my wife a message where I found a place where we could retire, where the average temperature year round was always between like 68 and 74. The temperature year round was between those temperatures. And she thought, oh, this is great. Well, where is it? It's an island. It's a Portuguese island off the coast of Africa, off the west coast of Africa. I mean, it's beautiful. It looks like a little Iberian, communities and such there. And we're not going there, but it just, the weather was perfect. The weather just looked absolutely great there. So when you're not involved in sports, what is it that you find to occupy your time? What do you do as a hobby besides being involved in sports?
Well, actually, I used to make more money on the web than I do now, but that's fine. I drive for a living, and basically with podcasts, I'm getting paid to listen to 30 hours a week of podcasts, and about 25 hours of that is Aussie football. So, and I've been listening to some of yours recently.
Well,
I really enjoyed the Chicken Lips, Ricky Nixon. That was maybe my favorite one. Your Demons president lady, that was good. And then the comedian that worked.
Gavin.
So there you go.
Gavin Ingham.
He said about a brand new Sharon, how they smell good and taste and they look good. Yeah, the Sharons are fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and then when I go on the show Friday night, I've had like 25 hours of information each week.
There you go.
In my ear of the AFL.
There you go. So, you were talking about the different shows that you're listening to there, and it's, you mentioned the Ricky Nixon interview, and to me that is, and first off, I did, when I reached out to Kate Roffey, I sent her a note on LinkedIn, like the day after she got the job, just, saying congratulations. She doesn't know me from Adam, just congratulations. And I said, when the dust settles, please consider this to be an open invitation to, I would love to invite you on and talk to you about, what a club president does, that sort of thing, because I didn't know. And like a week later, I get an email back from her. And first of all, I was stunned that she emailed me, and it scared the hell out of me that I was actually talking to one of the club presidents. But then the Ricky Nixon interview was only a 28-minute interview, but it's the favorite one that I have done.
You're talking about Ricky Nixon.
Yeah. Did you hear me say what? I was talking about that. I'm not sure how much of it caught, but when I got done with that interview, I asked him stuff that I thought was very positive things to talk about. The fact that he'd been a school teacher at one time, and just, the good things that he has done, because other people have heard about those other stories. And when we got done with the interview, he said to me, I have never had anybody ask me those kinds of questions before. I really appreciate it. Holy mackerel. To me, that was like the biggest compliment that I've gotten in an interview. And I told him, I said, I had seen the other stories. I said, there was no reason to bring any of that sort of thing up again. I said, I wanted to touch on positive stuff. I'm not here to make anybody look bad. I told him, I said, I'm trying to learn about the game here. And if I alienate somebody who I bring on, especially somebody of his stature who knows the people that he knows, that is one door that could, slam a lot of other doors right there. So, and I feel as though, that interview was done over a year ago, and I still trade little messages with him on Instagram once in a while. But I feel that someday down the road that maybe I could reach out to him and say, hey, do you think you could possibly, would you have a connection with such and such that I might be able to get on the show as an interview? And maybe he would do that for me, knowing and remembering the fact that I kind of, I don't want to say did him a solid, but I was respectful in the interview that I did here with him. So,
I'm sure he would, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the fact that he told the story about his nickname Chicken Lips, because I thought it might have been his skinny legs, like chicken legs. But I'd never heard that story of how he ate a hamburger with a knife and fork because his mouth was too small. That was absolutely fantastic. And then when he, because of what he's been through, then for him to talk about positive thinking, going for a run in the morning, connecting with your old friends. I mean, hey, we've all been through some stuff, and it was absolutely fantastic what he said about go for a run, and when you run, you feel better. So brilliant interview. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was, even though I've had a lot of laughs and such with other interviews, and to me that one is still my favorite because of the reaction that I got from him, because I think he had a notion of what it was going to be like, and it turned out to be something completely different. So, and again, that one was only audio, so that was at the time, it was not a face to face. So I'm really proud of that one, and I don't like to brag about myself at all, but I think I actually did a pretty decent job with that one. So it was.
You really did. You really did. And I mean, I learned all about his business. I heard things in that interview that I didn't know about him.
Yeah.
So you touched on some great stories. And what really interests me is when you interview people from around the US AFL as well, like stories like that. People like to hear different people's stories, and podcasts are just a fantastic medium for that.
Right. And that's why, I like talking to, I love interviewing, the club president and, a player here and there, but just talking to fans about the game and why they love their club and that sort of thing. To me, that's a really cool thing as well, because in many ways, the AFL and footy in general in Australia is much more of a family atmosphere because of the way that the clubs are structured than anything we have here in the United States, or even I think in Canada. Because the clubs are, the Green Bay Packers might be the best example of what the AFL is like, because it's, it's not owned by a single individual or a group of, 3 or 4 owners. It's kind of it's kind of like its own business, where you have people who kind of have stock in the company, if you will.
Absolutely, and there's diehard fans, and I've been in Canada 23 years, and I'm still learning different sayings. But when you asked the comedian guy, you weren't sure what a one-eyed supporter meant. I mean, that was fantastic, because those Magpies fans, they're so one-eyed, all they see is Magpies. So that was really good. That was interesting.
It was just terminology I had never heard before. It was
yeah.
It's and and I've had a few comedians on. I had the guys that do the Junk Time podcast. I don't know if you listen to them at all, but it's they kind of look at the stuff that went on the previous week, and they're both 2 comics that are on there that kind of just poke fun at things that happen, and some of it's just really funny, and I really enjoyed that one as well. And they I've got an agreement. I haven't set up a time yet, but I've gotten a yes from the comedian Limo to come on the show as well, who I guess from what I have heard was a pretty fair player himself when he was younger. From what I've been able to gather, because I actually learned a lot from him starting out watching the game, because I don't know if you had the Watch AFL app or not, but they had a game show on Fox Footy for a while called the Beep Test. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was
I haven't.
It was just it was only on for I think 2 years, but he was on there, and there was another comic that was on there. And then they had somebody else who was a retired footy player, or somebody who was in the game, and they would ask little trivia questions back and forth. And to me that was a great resource for me, because I was learning a little bit about the game from these questions that are being asked, and I kind of gave myself a real big fist pump one day when I actually knew one of the answers to the questions when they asked it. I knew, they asked the question, I was like, "Ooh, I know that one," and that was the first time ever, but it's it's not on anymore, but it was and I think they might have thought it was a little bit cheesy, but I really enjoyed watching that. I learned a lot from that. But yeah, it's just as a fascinating game, and I love the camaraderie, the relationship, and that's what I don't know if you've ever gone back and listened to. I think it's actually the second episode that I did, where I talk about my interpretation of the relationship between fans and players, and that I think that what happens at the AFL with the AFL pre-COVID, of course, was unlike anything I had seen in the NFL for sure. In most cases, the NBA and Major League Baseball, yes, a player will give away a signed baseball, or you see sometimes somebody will give away their gym shoes after a basketball game, but just that relationship, the players going out and shaking hands with the fans around the oval after a game, it's just, that's something you don't see in sports here in the U.S. And I made the argument that sports in the U.S. that they've kind of priced themselves out of being in the same orbit as typical people.
Well, the money involved has caused that. And Sav Rocker, who was the punter, he played for the Magpies and North Melbourne, I believe, he said once that, after the games in the NFL, the players do not hang out as much as they do in Australia. Things have changed, of course, but back when I was playing, and then even the AFL now, the players will go out in groups, and you got to be a bit careful these days, of course. But yeah, the money in America is just so big that you get too many egos, and you find that those players will kind of get their own posse, a group of friends that idolize them more. And that happens in Australia a little bit as well, but nowhere near as much.
Right.
But talk about fans, I mean, I got to hand it to Port Adelaide Power. I mean, when they play the In Excess song before the game, and they really engage their fans probably as well as any team. And I hate to say that, but I got to hand it to Port Adelaide there.
Yes. I actually referenced that song today in my tips. I said that Port Adelaide was going to win by a margin in excess of a set amount of. Yeah, it was a bad pun.
Yeah, very good.
So, of all the people that you have interviewed, who has been the person that you enjoyed talking to the most?
All right, I'll give you three. I'll give you one from Canada, one from the United States, and one from Australia. So let's start, first of all, with Canada. Well, it's got to be Pamela Anderson. I had a quick chat with her at Grey Cup, and the footage is pretty funny because she's famous and she's from Canada. USA, Tom Brady. I have interviewed Tom Brady 4 times back early on in his early first 5 years of his career, and he was very friendly to me, fantastic. And I just love Tom Brady because he's a team guy, and he really hasn't changed much over the years. Then I'll put Bill Romanowski a very close second. He gave me a lot of time, and he was a big, mean guy at the time for the Broncos.
He didn't spit on you, did he?
No. But without doubt, the biggest to me, because I grew up in Australia, would be the AFL, VFL player and legend coach Kevin Sheedy. I interviewed him at Louisville US Nationals, and I went up to him. I said, "Can I interview you?" He says, "Yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes," because he was just there to watch the game. He gave me 10 minutes. So that was my proudest, best achievement probably, because I was nervous. I had to prepare. Like, Kevin Sheedy's like,
he's a legend.
He's a legend. He's like Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky or someone like that. He's an absolute legend. And he has promoted Aussie football around the world probably more than anyone, the great Kevin Sheedy.
So he sees the potential of spreading the game beyond the shores of Australia.
Absolutely. And he was one of the first coaches back probably 30 years ago to come to America, go to the NFL teams, learn from the NFL, whether it's the medicinal stuff, the physiotherapy, the coaching. and he saw the opportunities, and he's traveled across here many times. He was out in Toronto, and he met with the AFL Canada teams in Toronto, and then he was in Louisville, and he also loved the racehorses. So he was there looking at a couple of horses, I believe, as well. So absolutely fantastic. Absolutely love Kevin Sheedy. And I was lucky enough to see the Bombers win in 84 and 85. Went on a trip with the South Gawler Lions and the bus to the VFL Grand Final, and the Bombers upset the Hawks, and two great moments going to the AFL Grand Final. And then I went again when the Crows won their first one in 97. So I've been to 3 AFL Grand Finals. So hopefully you get to go one day as well.
You know what? I like to sit down and look at the flight itinerary and costs and that sort of thing. Because I think I might have made enough connections where I might be able to find a couch at a couple different people's houses when I'm visiting different towns and that sort of thing. Maybe not until all the COVID stuff gets situated, of course. But I'm hoping in the next couple of years that maybe that this can happen. I've got my youngest is in her junior year of college, so she's got about a year and a half more to finish up. She's studying to be a teacher. I've got a son who's an officer in the Navy, but I'm hoping to go someday, hopefully.
Well, with what you're doing, and someone like Ricky Nixon would just call the AFL and say, "You give Mr. Yank on the footy. He needs media passes to every game. You should be able to get a top-level media pass at any AFL game because of what you're doing." And that's why, I've followed you and I connected with you, because you're doing a fantastic job spreading the word in America. And hey, anywhere in the world, we can all listen, right?
Yes, that's absolutely well. Yeah, I think it's been like 40 different countries that have listened to my. Some people must tune in and think it's soccer, but it's been a lot of fun. So, as you were growing up, who were your role models when you were in your formative years in South Australia?
I read something recently, and the player I mentioned was Johnny Platten. He grew up and played at Central District, which was my local area. He won a Magarey medal. Then he went on and played for the Hawks and won a Brownlow medal and premierships for the Hawthorn Hawks. And then probably after that, the pure brilliance of Gary Ablett Sr. was amazing. Dermot Bratton was amazing. Mm-hmm. But we had some great South Australian players as well. Stephen Kernahan, Andrew Jarman, Darren Jarman. There's just so many I could talk about. And, of course, Malcolm Blight, absolute legend. He's in the AFL Hall of Fame. He's the first podcast I listen to every morning, Sports Day SA. He's on that. And I got to say, Malcolm Blight and Jason Dunstall, I think they are far and above the most knowledgeable AFL media guys. Maybe Gary Lyons, the close third, but Malcolm Blight, absolute legend player as well. Jason Dunstall, fantastic.
I love listening to him.
Yeah. He's not afraid to maybe upset the hierarchy, Jason Dunstall. And I listen to their Fridays here. I listen to their Friday night Triple M podcast. He's brilliant. So big fan of Jason Dunstall.
Yeah,
there's so many amazing players over the years. There really is.
Well, and I have to tell you, of all of the people who do any kind of commentating or, who do commentary about the games, Gary Lyon has been the one that I've had the hardest time picking up his accent and discerning what he's saying. I really have to focus on him when he's talking to understand what he's saying. And I don't have that issue with anybody else. And I don't know why it is, but just his tone, and maybe it's just the level that he's speaking at. I just really struggle with understanding him.
Yeah, well, don't feel bad about that, because I can understand that. He's a little hard to understand, but his knowledge is, he's very, very good.
Yeah, he's very much so.
His co-partner on the radio, Tim Watson, he was a legend player for the Bombers. So that's one I listen to as well, their breakfast show in Melbourne.
So, as somebody who's been doing media as long as you have, what is the and I'm going to ask you the both sides of this coin here. So, I'm not going to leave you just this one here, but I'm going to ask you the bad news question first. What's the best piece of constructive criticism you got as a member of the media in your career?
Oh, I have to think about that. Probably just be careful when you're in the locker rooms and not overdo it, because sometimes I'm a bit hyperactive and so excitable that got to be careful and don't go in the losers' locker rooms. I did that when Green Bay Packers lost against the Vikings. So don't go in the losers' rooms and just be calm. Try and listen. Listen is the main thing. Some of these radio guys, they like the sound of their own voice too much and they talk too much. So just listen and just be smart.
What's the best compliment you have received?
Whew. I don't know about that. Probably the Kevin Sheedy interview. I was very proud of that. I prepared a lot. I knew that I couldn't muck up. I couldn't be stupid. Had to ask the right questions.
Uh-huh.
So probably the compliments from Australia about the Kevin Sheedy interview.
Okay. So you said you spend a lot of time listening to podcasts during the week, and you did say that there were several hours of the week it sounded as though they were not footy related podcasts. What other ones are you listening to besides footy, or what genres? You don't have to name the specific shows, but what type of show are you listening to besides footy podcasts?
Well, it varies on the time of year. So obviously, because I'm on Sports Grid Friday nights, AFL is my main focus the last 3 months. I've just started. I'll listen to PFT, Mike Florio and Chris Sims. The NFL is a favourite one of mine. The Denver Broncos with Mark Solerith. I'll listen to that. One from Australia is quite controversial, but Sam Newman's You Can't Be Serious. So Sam Newman is a legend of one of the guys from the Footy show on Channel 9 for 25 years. He's with Don Scott.
I have seen some old footage of him and Eddie McGuire together. One in particular that was just like, when I saw it, it was one of those, holy shit, I can't believe he did that moments. And I'm not going to bring up what it is, but you probably have seen it as well. Yeah, we'll talk about it off air if you have not seen it. But I would imagine you probably have seen it. But it was just, yeah, he is very much he as you said, he's a lot. I would say he's a lot like Jason Dunstall in terms of having his mindset. Here's what I think, and I don't care if you don't like what I think.
Yeah, he made a lot of money for Channel 9, and now he's just doing the podcast, and he's basically doing it to razz up the cancel culture, the wokes, but he has some good points. I don't agree with everything he says, of course, but you also need him out there to give the other side. But yeah, he was very well known in his street interviews, but the cancel culture's caught up with him. Things have changed, Craig, as you know.
Right.
So yeah, I vary. I listen to a lot of different great podcasts, but some of my favorites are like Triple M from Adelaide and Melbourne, because it's sports and it's comedy. Like those guys are very funny.
Yeah, I don't know how much you are into the history of the game, but there's a great one that basically each episode covers, went back, and it started in the 1890s, and it's covered, each episode is 1 year of the VFL, and they're going to go up to the present day in the AFL. But it's just been fascinating they spent an hour and a half or so talking about that season, and I think they're into the mid or late 1950s right now. So they've been going on for about 2 years now with that show called Kick to Kick podcast. It's fascinating, the deep dive they do into each season. It's really interesting.
Wow. Well, that's one I have to add, because I've followed AFL probably from, well, I don't want to give away my age, but from about 1970, I can probably remember the first VFL grand final in black and white. So I went away a little bit when I first came here. So from, say, 2000 to 2005, I didn't watch as much. It was all NFL for me and CFL. But now the last 6 or 7 years, especially with Gabe's show, I'm really just try and learn as much as I can because, you know, when you're on a TV radio show, you don't want to slip up. You just got to try and have everything covered.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why it's nice to be able to edit things like what we're doing right now. So, so I just have a couple of other questions here before we wrap up. But what are 3 movies that you think everybody should see? I don't know. Maybe you're not a movie buff, and that's
probably my favorite movie is Mad Max 2 with Mel Gibson. It was filmed up not far from where I grew up in Broken Hill, up that area. So that's a fantastic one. I watched a good one the other night, Ford versus Ferrari, and that the Formula One movie. I like that one. I like a lot of movies. I like a lot of good Netflix stuff as well, Games of Thrones and so forth. I like a lot of that medieval type of shows. I really enjoy some of Last Kingdom, Breaking Bad. I'm going into series now, but
that's okay.
So much good stuff on Netflix. There really is.
Yeah, that's you're right. There's a ton of things that you can find and to definitely occupy your time there. So, I've asked this question during interviews for the last couple of months now, and I just think I think it's just a really interesting question. Oh, well, actually, I have a couple here. Let me get to that one in a moment here. If you are put in charge of putting together a concert at the Rogers Place, I did my digging in there because I knew it wasn't the Saddle Dome because I thought that was in Calgary. What 3 artists are performing there? What 3 artists? Basically, what artists? Basically, what music do you like then?
Oh, well, I gotta say, U2 would be first. I'd probably have to put the Pommy Lady, Adele up there, and I would, if I could, if Michael Hutchins was still alive, In Excess. Love them growing up. Absolutely love them growing up. Sad story how he died, but U2, Adele, In Excess. There you go.
Well, I think that makes you an honorary Port Adelaide fan then.
No, don't say that. My Crows mates will go off if you hear that.
I know. That's kind of why I said it. So they'll give you a little bit of grief there. Okay, so the last 2 questions that I have for you here. If you find yourself in a room with all of the people that you've met in the world, who is the first person that you're looking for?
Oh, Pamela Anderson. Nah, she's getting a bit old, but she's very famous, and I really enjoyed meeting her.
Who's upstairs right now at your place?
Hey, my girlfriend's been with me 6 years. She knows what I'm like.
Okay.
I'd have to put Peyton Manning there. I absolutely love Peyton Manning. Absolute champion. One of my favorite athletes ever. Roger Federer. Kobe's not around. Massive Kobe fan. Tom Brady.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. There's a few for you.
Now, the last question that I have for you. What is your autobiography going to be called?
Why Kim became Myk.
Holy shit. I just realized where that came from. I don't know if you saw the little light bulb just go on over my head right now.
Yeah. There you go.
I cannot believe that I didn't. I thought all along I've been thinking there was some sort of an Irish theme to this that I hadn't picked up on yet.
No.
Oh my God. This is good Lord. I cannot believe I did not pick up on that.
That's all right.
That's
all right. It's a funny story. I was in a bar in Vancouver many years ago, and I was selling engineering software, as I said. And I gave my business card to this guy that was in engineering, and he goes, "Your name's Myk." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Kim backwards is Myk." I'm going, "Wow, I'm going to use that, absolutely." And then became Myk Aussie. So there you go.
Well, that's Wow. Okay. And I wish I had figured that out earlier, but we wouldn't have gotten to that story in terms of where the Myk came from. So it wasn't something that you came up with. Somebody else came up with that for you. So uh, that is that's terrific. So where can people find you?
All right. Well, it's Myk Aussie, so it's MYK and then Aussie AUSSIE. So if you type that in Google, you'll find me everywhere. Twitter, MykAussie.com. I started in year 1999. 2000, and then last year I've developed MykAussie.tv. So I've put a lot of work into that. I've got TotalCFL.com as well, but yeah, basically MYK Aussie and Twitter. Twitter's where I play mostly.
Okay. Okay. Terrific. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Kim Harrison, or the former engineering software salesman known as Myk, for coming on today. And I appreciate this. This was a lot of fun. And we had a couple little glitches here, but we got past it. And you were right. This was a hell of a lot of fun talking to you about this and learning about your journey and just how passionate you are about the games here in North America. And I appreciate the fact that you the kind words that you said about what I'm doing, and that means the world to me, because you're somebody who I respect what you're doing because of the time that you have devoted to it. I've never been much. Yeah, I'm not somebody who does a lot of wagering or anything of that nature, because I generally we've never had a whole lot of money in our house because my wife was a stay-at-home mom for the first 10 years of our kids' lives. So I spent a lot of time looking for that second nickel to rub together with the one I had in my pocket. But I do enjoy listening to the discussions about the who's favored and who's not favored and that sort of thing. And I when I do my tips, I joke and I say, please don't take my advice because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So hopefully nobody calls and says, "Oh yeah, you tipped North Melbourne to beat West Coast this week." I said, yeah, I did, just because I had a hunch. But I appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun. This is great.
Yeah, thanks. You got a great name. I call you Mr. Footy Yank, and I'm sure we'll keep in touch.
It is Craig,
trying. Yeah, we're both trying to do what we can to grow the great game of Australian rules football. So thank you, and love what you're doing.
And I don't know if I don't think I said this during this discussion here. I said I honestly think that Aussie rules is the greatest game on the planet. I really do. I think to me it's a game that to me is superior to American football, to gridiron. I like it better because it doesn't stop. It just keeps on going. Unless there's something catastrophic that happens, the game keeps on going.
Yeah, well, it really is the greatest game I've ever played. Tennis was second for me, but just love playing Aussie rules football. And then I was lucky enough to come and play some in Canada at an older age. Just read the ball, played in the back lines, and tried to judge it a bit better than other people. So, yeah, I played my last game at 44 years old and busted my shoulder. So that was it. But, yeah, fantastic game to play.
What year was that, if I may ask?
I moved to Ottawa in June 2010 and played one game for the Swans, and that was it. And then I've umpired since then.
Remember earlier in the discussion, you said you didn't want to give away your age. You just did.
I know. I got a girlfriend now. It's when you're single, you don't want to tell women your age, right?
We're pretty close to the same age. I'm 58, so I think I'm a little bit older than you are.
Yeah.
So, again, Kim, thanks so very much for coming on today, man. I truly appreciate it. This was a hell of a lot of fun, and I can't thank you enough for the kind words that you shared with me. So that was great.
Thanks a lot, and I look forward to hearing you interview some people famous in Australia. It's fantastic. Go and sales, right? Call them and see what happens. They can only say no, right?
That's true. Yep.
And I want to give a huge shout out of thanks to Kim Harrison, Myk Aussie, for coming on the podcast. We've been trading a lot of messages for a couple of months, just trying to nail down a time. And I had an absolute blast talking to Kim. This was a lot of laughs. So much stuff that we talked about that was off air that we did not record. That well, some of it we couldn't put out on in the media, but just an awful lot of laughs with all the things that he's involved with. And if you want to learn more about his website and what he does, check out the links that I have provided for him in the show notes. So hopefully you'll check out what he's doing as well. Remember, if you got an idea for a future show topic or somebody that you think would be a great guest, drop me a voicemail on the website. Drop me a DM there. Remember, you can also shoot me an email at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can leave a review on my website as well at yankonthefooty.com. I'd love for you to do that. And folks, remember, you can find me on Twitter at Yank_on, as well as on Facebook and Instagram at @YankOnTheFooty. And if you just search out my name, Craig Wessels, you'll find the podcast over there on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening. I know that things are still up in the air in Australia, and those of us in the States, we're thinking about you. You know, we got our own issues that we're dealing with here, but we're getting kind of that herd immunity. We're getting a lot of people vaccinated here. Hopefully that's going to be taking place with you here very soon in Australia, that you're able to get that taken care of and have this just as one less worry on your mind. But look out for each other. Don't forget to call, FaceTime, get on a Zoom call. Call somebody up, tell them a joke. Whatever, just be decent to one another and look out for people, because there's a lot of people dealing with some really difficult things right now. And folks, again, I thank you so much for tuning in. I do ask that you maybe give this podcast a share. Pop it up on your social media. Let people know what you think about it. I'd love a review on Apple or even up on my website. That'd be great. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, may your dribble kick never hit the post. Until next time, I'll catch you later. This has been episode number 98 of A Yank on the Footy. Don't forget that you can reach me at Yank_on or at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can also find me on the website, yankonthefooty.com, and on Instagram and on Facebook at A Yank on the Footy. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll share the podcast with your friends and family. Goodbye.